it's becoming what I call useless theater, because if you do not have a buy-in from other parts of organization, then you have to continue educating why this is important. And there's many parts of organizations do not think about risks every day because that's not their job.
I just haven't seen great supplier relationship management program that was leading edge. And we always tell ourselves like an SRM program is supposed to deliver. That's not to say they don't exist. It's just to say that I think they're a bit rare to find a really well-managed SRM function.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Proc-N-Roll, your guide to practical procurement. We're super excited to be back together. The three musketeers are here. We've got Zach from London. Natasha's in San Mateo in California. Today, you catch me over in Hawaii. We are bringing you the best, the latest, the greatest, and super excited to be back with you. Top of everybody's mind today. Zach, what's on your mind? What have you been working on?
I think AI is heating up. Right. I don't know what it's like for you. 2026 feels like the year AI needs to deliver value. And people are talking about outcomes, and they're talking about how they're going to scale, and they're talking about, how to just basically transform with AI across procurement. I find it really exciting. So I've been busy, helping my company, helping clients come up with the propositions, but also come up with the use cases and implement pilots, and just really focused on building out agents and trying to build that out.
Well, that'd be amazing. 2026 is the year AI gets practical instead of just fun and games. That'd be very cool. But
for sure, do you guys remember we were talking in one of our episodes in 2025 that one of our predictions was that all CPOs will have to rethink about their tech stack. We'll talk about it specifically. So very cool, Zach. So that you're finding the CPOs who are actually thinking the same way we do.
Yeah, I know. And, I don't think it's going to be a long time before every CPO is going to be really, heads down in this. We talk about fixing the basics in procurement all the time. This AI thing is just huge. Yeah. How things with you guys?
Very cool.
So your mind.
I've been on the road this year, so I think I visited maybe a dozen or a few more than that clients this year. And it's really been awesome to get out on the road and see people. The holidays are kind of a quiet time, right? Everyone's kind of tied up, and to get out, meet with customers, understand their goals for the year ahead, things that are working really well and things that need improvement. It's just been fantastic. I mean, I'm very tired of being on airplanes. Let's just be clear. But those moments when I'm sitting with a customer and we're starting to workshop ideas and value, it's just fantastic. Natasha, what's top of your mind today?
So I started visiting clients in a couple of weeks. A couple of conferences coming up, which will be great to see all procurement friends and talk about procurement transformation, tech, and all of that. I actually. Yesterday, I read a very interesting article. Since it's top of mind, I am curious to get your perspective on that. UPS and Amazon are wrapping up or significantly reducing their partnership. And while Amazon is UPS's largest customer, is the less profitable one. So it was very interesting to read about that decision and see how companies making money that, yes, will forfeit the revenue, but we're going to focus on higher profitability. And it's interesting to see that the customer convenience, not necessarily in the center of the decision, but also from the business perspective, I understand the decision because Amazon has significantly grown its own supply chain and logistics team and have multiple ways to deliver goods to the customers and also simplify the returns of the goods, especially with acquisition of the Whole Foods number of years ago. So it has its physical space to return, but still it triggered my memories of when two other giants, Amex and Costco, and that 16-year relationship at that time. And it kind of like it shook business world because it's kind of like, wow, there's so much codependency. And here it's another example when two massive companies got in business, created very successful structure that was convenient to consumers and financially beneficial for both sides. And yet now they're changing direction. So kind of good to see that the business world doesn't stay stagnant.
It's actually, what's so interesting is we always talk about SRM. And I think that's our topic today, right? But we never talk about relationships evolve. And if you've got 10 years long-term relationship with the supplier that's been very fruitful to you, like UPS and Amazon did, after 10 years, things change. I imagine, I don't know the details. Maybe UPS got too reliant on Amazon. Maybe Amazon built its own service up, for example. But we never talk about that moment when, things just aren't really, you're not on the same wavelength anymore, and you got to divorce your partners. And, in procurement, it's a topic I just don't come across often. I just thought that was interesting.
I was just glancing at the news, and it says that Amazon now has airplanes. I didn't know that was the case. I see their trucks all over the place, the long haul trucks and the last mile trucks and everything else. But yeah, I imagine when that relationship started, UPS, from a logistics perspective, UPS was probably a giant compared to Amazon. And then, now Amazon is a rival of any logistics, organization on the planet.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it's just unfortunate that the unfortunate side of any of this change is that they usually result in layoffs. And UPS announced, I think, 30,000 job cut, which is quite significant for the company. And considering also that that's on the top of the layoffs they had last year. Speaking of layoffs, for our viewers and listeners, we had an amazing episode with Lucien Alziari a couple of weeks ago. So do listen in. He's CHRO, who's super well known and regarded in the industry. He groomed, mentored, coached 25 other CPOs, CHROs, which is a great, has a great command of his field. And we were talking about layoffs, commercial impact of layoffs, and if they really make sense, and how quickly companies bounce back to the previous headcount and all of that. So do take a listen at that episode. But let's talk about today's topic.
Well, I miss being with you and Lucien, but I went back and listened to it. And Natasha, it was amazing. The leadership insights that he brought to the table and you guys were talking about. Yeah, absolutely, wholeheartedly agree. Go back and listen to that episode at least once, maybe a couple of times. It was fantastic.
He's on another level. Yeah, Lucien was great.
Yeah, what a great guy.
He really was.
We'll have to make that We'll have to make that a recurring visitor as well. I know there's a number of folks that we want on this podcast on a regular basis. And I think getting in here at least once a year to talk about these principles and leadership would be great.
Be amazing.
I met him through World 50. We were both facilitators for the Next Leader program, and we were paired up to talk about intentional leadership. I would say that we saw some of the tears in the rooms full of grown-up people talking about like a true leadership. So Lucien is amazing in his delivery of everything related to leadership and talent.
Yeah. Well, Natasha, why don't you lead us into the conversation today around supplier relationship management?
Yes. We had a number of episodes on past episodes when we were focusing on technology and AI development and the role of the CPOs, but every organization depends on third parties, and I think over the years, the perception that we procurement professionals have about suppliers and the type of relationships that we're trying to build with suppliers is different. And I've been on the buyer side for 25 years, and for the last 2, I've been on the supplier side. It's also interesting for me to see the different mentality, how companies view relationships with third parties. So I'd like to kick off with us just sharing perspectives. Like in your professional tenure, do you see that the role of the suppliers and expectations that enterprises put on the third parties, if that had changed?
Conrad, do you want to take this one first?
It's hard to talk about the suppliers as a big blob because, me personally, I think you've got to say of the critical strategic suppliers. I mean, in some ways, this kind of comes back to the Amazon UPS conversation, right? Who are the critical suppliers? Who are the critical customers? Understanding who they are. I have sensed in most organizations a desire to shift from cost savings to value. And I don't know how you get to value conversations without really getting into relationship. But at the same time, I don't think this is a one size fits all. And I've seen that shift and that desire. But when you get down into from the big head, if you categorize it and look at the big head of strategic critical and then all the way down to the other side, I don't see people. I haven't seen a change in kind of the just outside the head to the rest of it. I think everyone's still talking about managing suppliers in strategic ways. I think, however, most people are still just treating them like utilities. Like they haven't it's hard. And I hope we get into this today, but it's really hard to implement effective supplier relationship management.
I think it's really hard. Also, look, in all my years of consulting, having seen so many organizations, I just haven't seen personally, great supplier relationship management program that was, leading edge and was, what we always tell ourselves like an SRM program is supposed to deliver. That's not to say they don't exist. It's just to say that, I think they're a bit rare to find a really well managed SRM function. So yeah, I'm still having conversations about supplier relationship management, usually with IT functions because they like to manage, I think that they tend to be a bit more mature in organizations in terms of managing their vendors. But again, I always see scope to do so much more. So usually like a policy, there's some segmentation, there's some, QBRs that are scheduled, for example. But is this relationship really driving value? Are you really driving the most of the value? How are you measuring that? Right. For me, the biggest thing is SRM needs the whole business. Procurement can't do it by itself. Like you can't schedule a meeting with a supplier and have a great QBR without
procurement shouldn't do it by itself, right? Because I think that there's a confusion often exists in enterprises that supplier relationship management is procurement business. It's procurement business to structure it and create the framework for the company. But that's the enterprise business and it's enterprise responsibility. And it should be an enterprise interest to marketing should be very interested in them evaluating performance of their agencies. Equally, like supply chain should be very interested in standardized performance evaluation of their carriers. It shouldn't be done by procurement. Procurement can help with framing how to do it in a fair way and how to do it in kind of like organized, structured way where the enterprise really gets the information. Is your supplier in good financial standing? Is your supplier performing to the spirit of the contract when you agreed on the subject? Did your supplier come forward with innovations? How often procurement people get frustrated that they find out about innovative solutions that suppliers created when the conversation comes about renewals or taking the business to RFP? So why do you think it's so hard it's not that complex creating framework for supplier relationship management, how to segment suppliers is not that difficult. Why do you think it's one of the areas that progressed very little in the last, let's say, 20 years?
Well, Natasha, you asked the question, has it changed? By how the way you just reframed that, is your opinion as well that not much has changed here?
I agree with Zach. I didn't see that many organizations with very well-established SRMs. And when I try to establish them in organizations, success was hit or miss.
So
I
that's
think
3 for 3. That's
answering
3.
my own question, why was it difficult? We couldn't get attention from other enterprise leaders. They
So
didn't
that's
see the
3
value.
for 3. We all agree
You're
not much is improved, right? So that I love your question. Like, well, why not? You couldn't get attention from enterprise leaders. Zach, what are you seeing as the biggest obstacle?
I have a gut feeling here. I really think it comes down to relationships are about people. And that's why you can have the best structure, the best QBR template, the best whatever, right? Process. At the end of the day, I think to really get to that next level, you needs to be, relationship driven as in people driven. So people at the top of both companies need to be working together. And then that needs to cascade further down into procurement and other parts of the business so that multiple stakeholders from both parties are working together. And for that to work as well, you need the cultural fit. And I think if you bring all those together, cultural fit and aligning people, people building relationships, I think that's when strategy really, the strategic value starts to come in because you got such a broad area. It's not just a QBR meeting. QBR is where all the good ideas go, right? But everything else happens in that process. That's my 2 cents.
Is this so? So I got a question for both of you. How much is this like people management? Because I have an opinion that if you had these like Superman glasses that could look across the world and say how many really good managers are out there that are doing really good people management, do you think it's a lot better than what we're talking about with really good supplier management? Is this just human nature? Like it's easy to just like set this thing aside and you hire an employee that's fantastic. You don't, a lot of managers don't do a good job setting expectations and giving them resources and training and support. And then they're surprised when, a year or two later, they're like, how is this, superstar candidate turning into like a mediocre or worse employee? And I see the two as very aligned, but the behavior is kind of the same. Like why are people not investing in the strategic relationship and development items with their people and with their suppliers to move it forward?
I see it slightly differently because with talented employees, I subscribe to philosophies that hire the smartest and step away and let them do the job. With suppliers, I think it's difficult because they know their business, but navigating across especially large enterprises is extremely complex. Like very often people ask me is like, are you pursuing your former employers as potential customers? I'm like, no way. I do not know how to be a supplier in the companies where I used to run procurement organizations because it's very, very difficult. Those enterprises, so especially the large scale, extremely cumbersome. And I think that with supplier relationship management, you can't step away. You have to, especially suppliers that enterprise depends on significantly. There is a need to help them navigate through the enterprise. So I see slightly different people.
I'm going to hold my point on this one. So you let's say we both know Zach is like, he's like the best. We would both love to have him in our team. If we bring him into our team, he's one of these top A player kind of people. We bring him in and we don't set clear expectations, even though, hey, I hired a great person. I'm expecting him to figure all this out. I do expect him to contribute to what these expectations should be. And I just kind of, okay, Zach, go make money for me or go do this or go do that. Like super ambiguous. A few of those people may stay aligned. In fact, some of them may demand management back from what I've learned over time, Natasha, I would come to you and say, hey, it's not clear to me what I need to do to be like, what do you need me to do if you're not telling me? And I see suppliers asking for that same kind of stuff, but still, I think the level, the discipline around clear expectations, vision and goals are probably, and then facilitating success in some way or another are universal at the people level and the supplier level, whether they're really great suppliers or really crappy suppliers. They're unlikely to do exceptional work without those things being in place.
This is a great day, Conrad. Like, as much as I love you, I disagree with you yet again, because I think that if I come to suppliers with all my clear expectations and exactly like do this, and this, then I am cutting opportunity for them to show their creativity, and I'm not tapping into their into their vision and into their tool of tricks and good practices, the practices and good solutions that they learn from other customers that they are serving that I can benefit from. I would like to, not with all suppliers, but this is where I think supplier segmentation is very important, that those critical suppliers for your business, you sit down with them and you brainstorm on what the solution is. You tell them what you need at the end, but how to get there, you arrive to it together. Your own where you're going to may change.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I think we're more aligned than maybe the way that felt with what I said. So if we get to a place where we're micromanaging suppliers, just like employees, it's going to fail. But I love what you're describing, which is you clarify expectations in a collaborative way, which, by the way, if we work together, I would expect that in my one-on-one with you, you're not just telling me exactly how to do everything. And if I don't agree with what you're telling me we should do, we're having a conversation. So I love the collaborative arrival at what the goals and expectations are. But if those aren't clear, and then over time managing towards those, if you do that every QBR, for example, what you just described, let's sit down and talk about everything that's important. And it's this big vision plan idea, and you don't get to practical, okay, this is what we said 6 months ago. Where are we? What's happening? Then you don't really move, right? That's a lack of leadership and the lack of relationship management.
Yeah, I just want to come back to Natasha, your point around segmentation. I mean, that is a classic case in point. Every time I look at a procurement segmentation, some procurement teams, they'll have like multiple different segmentation criteria. Like they'll have, spend or commercial relevance, they'll have risk, etc. But most often what ends up happening is you get a cut of like these tier one suppliers. And very often they're tier one because they're high risk, because they carry some kind of operational, risk for your business. And so they're in that top tier bucket, but that doesn't necessarily mean that's where the innovation is going to come from. So I think one thing the all procurement teams are doing is separating these concerns. Or like when you do your segmentation, you need to have multiple strategies for managing suppliers. You have your compliance and risk stuff, right? And you manage it that way. And you have your innovation and, new ideas. And those could be very small suppliers, by the way, with like very little spend. You don't know, right? It just depends on the supply chain. So that's like a distinction that I always see that's missing, that people conflate compliance with innovation with some of these other things and try to give a supplier, I think you need to identify which suppliers are innovative, which ones are the risky ones, etc. And then don't have the same agenda for all of them. The only other thought I had as well, guys, is, do you know how I was said at the beginning that I don't think there are a lot of procurement teams who are running great SRM programs? I do think that's true, but I think that's true in the indirect space. I'm pretty sure if you look at the direct procurement space, maybe not procurement's driving it, but the stakeholders in the business and those big strategic joint ventures, etc., those relationships are being managed, and in many cases very well, right? Where you have an Amazon UPS type relationship. So I think there's stuff that we can learn from what's being done that, usually procurement doesn't take accountability for. Maybe we should.
But for all fairness, you can have 10 billion on direct side, 10 billion on indirect. Direct would have 400 suppliers. Indirect would have 25,000.
Yeah.
Well, and I see that I often, like in my days at Intel, the direct material supply chain teams were very significantly staffed, like as a per supplier. I don't know how, Zach, maybe you see this, and Natasha, as you look across your work, like how many procurement professionals, supply chain professionals are assigned to manage like a per supplier kind of a ratio, like how that plays out. But there was a whole team of people at Intel that were managing the silicon wafer ingot suppliers. Like that's such a critical part to the business. There's a team of people that manage that. They understand the market, the pricing, the suppliers. They're talking to the suppliers all the time. It's a different world.
Yeah, but that's not procurement, right? Typically, like it's people who, like engineers. It's they have different titles and they don't. It might be procurement.
These best practices, they we've seen these in that space for decades, right? So you're saying, hey, we can learn from them. Why aren't we learning from them? And by the way, I would argue that academically we see it. Like I think the three of us could sit down on a whiteboard and we could say, this is the ideal supplier management program for, as a template, almost any business that we show up at. This is the best practice. Like I think we can write it down. What's the difference between writing it down and actually implementing it?
Yes, we can create framework, we can create structure. Then you go to this with this to the enterprise, and enterprise still operates on what's in it for me, right? And if you look at it from the perspective, what's in it for you, how do you deliver the notion that, like, let me step back. Why do we think that having a structured supplier relationship program is a necessary thing for the company? Is it just the box to check? Or do we really think that each enterprise has to have an SRM?
It's a good question. Maybe not every enterprise in every industry needs an SRM program, but I think you stand to benefit. Most companies stand to benefit from having better supplier relationships. That's reflected in all kinds of ways: lower cost of business, better experience, access to innovation. So these can apply to almost any company, right? I don't know, Conrad. To your question, for me, I think the most important thing for me would be like the alignment on the incentives. So once I know who my strategic suppliers are, okay, this is my innovation 4 or 5 suppliers who I get my ideas from. All right, well, what's in it for them? Why should they come to me first with all their great ideas? And why should they commit resources and people to study my processes, my data, all of my broken systems and everything, and help me, be better? So I think there's got to be like some aspect of win-win to it as well. I do see that missing from a lot of programs. Again, procurement's in a box, doing categorization, segmentation, creating agendas. And it's like, yeah, but you almost need to create the program with the supplier, right? You almost need to they need to be in from the ground and agree, and you'd have a common goal and incentive.
But then it's becoming what I call useless theater. Because if you do not have a buy-in from other parts of organization, then you have to continue educating why this is important. And there's, many parts of organizations do not think about risks every day because that's not their job. And many parts of organization do not think about, cost management on a daily basis. That's not their job. So it is continued to be the role of procurement to educate organization why their contribution is important or why their ownership is important. I think in some advanced marketing organization, they actually would be fighting with procurement for the ownership of QBRs, right? And they would feel that because these are their agencies, that they should be in charge and in ownership of any aspects of supplier relationship management. And I would say, hallelujah, take it, own it. We procurement will just create a framework that would be applicable to marketing, to supply chain, to HR, to R&D in evaluating if the suppliers we're utilizing as an enterprise, if they deliver to us the innovation, quality, operational quality, if they keep the price point, if they inform us of any changes in their industry. That's
the framework that we said we can write down. Check. That's all done. I think, Natasha, you hit on something. Like, we're not doing a good job convincing the business that this is important and that we can help them. Some cases they're like, this is really important. You guys can't help us, right? You don't know anything about marketing. You don't know anything about this or that or the other. But I think there's a lot of excuses in this space, by the way. Some of them I think are really valid. Like, I don't have enough people because we're doing all this transactional work to go do the stuff you're talking about. The other thing is, when you get in a room like we would and put the framework together, let's say we're all working at, I don't know, IBM or some really cool company like that. And you sit down and say, okay, here's our big vision. Let's go implement it. I think the other thing that happens is this idea that we're going to bite off more than we can really go execute on. That's the failure I see, because this is really hard. You have to start small and you have to build it into the DNA in order to make progress on this.
Maybe that's a good bit of practical advice, Conrad. For most people out there who want to stand up an SRM, don't when you first sit down to do it, have 10 or 20 suppliers. Start with 1 or 2, or literally just try and get it right.
Yes.
2 suppliers, 3. Yeah, don't do your segmentation on day one. Maybe leave that until you've got a kind of.
Well, you can segment, but your segmentation is going to say there's 1,000 of those suppliers, and there's no way you can do that, right? So you have to do another granular level of segmentation, which probably comes back to which of my business stakeholders do I have the kind of relationship with internally that this is because it is going to take a team, not just procurement.
The other thing Natasha said, which I think you popped an idea into my head, is, Natasha, you said you're happy for procurement not to own the framework, but not to actually, you need the business to actually have that relationship with the supplier, and they're the ones who align the incentives with the supplier and everything. Completely agree. But it got me thinking, maybe our role as procurement isn't to set up these SRM programs, but maybe what it is, it's to create a platform for SRM to take place and then market it internally so that, we basically have all the tools, all the data, all the analytics. We convey and sell the value somehow. We always have a hard time selling stuff internally and as procurement. But then maybe trying to find, wait for the business to come to you. Because if you're saying, Natasha, it's really not my problem. Ultimately, I can't do it without the stakeholder. Then, what do they say? Build it and they'll come.
If you build it, they will come. They actually, when you were talking about it, I was thinking about that. Yeah, if you build it, they will come.
Well, I don't think it's going to be quite as easy as that, because in this case, the building it is easy, and the bringing them to the, helping them find the water. Can bring a horse to water, but they won't, whatever. Can't make them drink. That seems to be really tricky. In the factory, if the tires don't show up, the cars don't go out the door, and then the person responsible for, those metrics gets really upset, and they go downstream and figure out who's in charge of the supplier that delivers tires. Right? You get in these other organizations. I think they all care. They all know what success is in their business. I suspect most of us in this function are setting up supplier relationship management programs that fit our framework and our expectations and our strategy, instead of this is a conversation that needs to happen with the head of marketing, the head of IT, and me as the head of procurement, right? I can't go, this isn't going to work very well from the bottoms up, right? What matters at the top of the function? Okay, who is the one supplier that you think is most critical to your success this year? Let's figure out how to get that supplier executing. Sorry, you guys have tapped into such a passion thing for me, so I apologize. 2 points really quick. We talked about AI doing all the administrative stuff in the future. This is the future. So figuring out the framework and being very directly involved in relationship management. If you can't figure this piece out, so start learning it now. What role do we have in procurement? What does your job look like? So it absolutely has to happen.
So in which situations you guys think that it's cool for procurement to step out and let business and suppliers kind of co-create their solutions directly?
By solutions, you mean like their expectations and their framework and stuff?
I think it's an operating model question, because you can have all kinds. You can have the model where procurement really facilitate, and they schedule the meeting, the agenda, they look at the data, they brief the stakeholder, they brief the supplier and bring everyone into a room together. We can also have like a center-led type model where, you do, the onus is on the stakeholder or the supplier relationship owner, but you need to equip them with the right tools, knowledge, the understanding of why this is important, how it drives value, etc., alignment to the business strategy. So I think that's how you get there. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
I think you end up with both, right? I mean, it's impossible for procurement to be involved in managing suppliers at every level across every function and that's impossible. So we can't do everything. I think the key is where do we strategically think that we're going to invest in the stakeholder relationship to the level that we're going to partner in these things? And some of them are going to go poo-poo, don't want to play with you, and you're off and you just forget about it. Like, my advice would be avoid wasting a whole bunch of time trying to win a battle that you're not winning. It could be history, like your predecessor didn't have the relationship with marketing or IT and they think procurement's stupid and they're going to have to see more success over time. You might have, there's 100 things that might be going on, but go where you can add the most value and go learn how to do this really well. Build the success stories and then come back and kind of show that value, just like you're trying to build your own business and sell it.
And that's a practical insight, Conrad, right? So do the stakeholder mapping before you do the segmentation, maybe, right? So that you know actually who's going to partner with you on an SRM type.
They kind of come together, right? Your stakeholder segmentation and your supplier segmentation. It's sort of two looks at the same data cube.
So we always pride ourselves on leaving our viewers and listeners with practical suggestions, like something that they can start doing tomorrow. So if an organization contemplating transitioning from transactional supplier management to true strategic supplier relationship management program, what are the practical steps we can offer them that will deliver long-lasting traction of the program?
I think based on this conversation, for me, it's that this isn't an exercise that begins in a spreadsheet. It begins with the conversation with people in your business about how they're working with suppliers. So I guess my first bit of practical advice is do that stakeholder mapping. Even if you have an SRM program today that's been running for a while, are you actually connected with all the right stakeholders, right? With the right supplier relationship owners? Do you have the right authority to align incentives and set strategy? I go back to that. I think it's all about people and the relationships. So.
Yeah, I would add to that don't be overly attached to own it. Be as a procurement professional, we're ahead of enabler. So create the framework and find a way to sell it, because we all in procurement, we constantly selling. We're selling our vision. We're selling necessity to be compliant. We're selling policies. We're selling good processes. So sell your vision and customize it why each function will benefit from SRM in their own way. So don't have any personal attachment. And I also want us to talk, Conrad, you go, and then we'll talk about criteria, how we segment suppliers. So you go with your practical suggestions, Conrad.
Well, I said start simple, and I would absolutely, underscore that again and again and again and again. It's easy to get the framework. You can probably go AI it together before the end of the day. This is generally what we want to do and generally how it needs to look. But you're going to be tempted to say, oh, we can do this with 20 suppliers. You can't. You shouldn't. You have to do this and figure out how to do it really well. So, and by the way, Zach, you kind of were like, it starts with, don't worry about the spreadsheet. I actually think you have to go to the stakeholder with the data. So this is not a chicken and an egg. They both have to come together. But 100%, start simple. Find a stakeholder that you have or can build a really good relationship with. Figure out what matters the most to their business. We keep saying that. Like, procurement success here is business success. If we don't enable their business success, which should be the foundation of SRM, right? That's the same thing as the tires in the factory. Then understanding business success, finding the partner that wants and trusts you to collaborate with them on that success, and then layer that in with one, maybe two suppliers. Prove it out for 6 to 12 months. And then they will come, right? They'll start talking about marketing. Will talk to finance on the, in the C-suite, and they'll be like, holy crap, you should see what procurement did to help us here.
What you said, Conrad, is just worth the listen of this episode, I think, for our listeners. So yeah, I completely agree with all that. That's great.
Okay, so if I'm a procurement manager, director, CPO, it doesn't matter. The level doesn't matter. I'm looking at my supplier composition, and hopefully I do have access to know how many suppliers I have. And I see 20,000, which is like normal for organization with like 2 billion in revenue, right? That can be overwhelming. That can be overwhelming to the point when I just want to I will think about it next year, right? And then just put it aside. How do we dissect it in digestible bites? How do we make it less scary from supplier segmentation perspective? What should be the criteria on how to look at it? What do you guys suggest from your practical perspective?
I think the initial spreadsheets are pretty easy, honestly. I mean, they're not super insightful when you're looking at 20,000 lines, but there's a few ways that you need to be able to dissect the data. I think we've talked about it on some past podcasts, but sorry, again, this is so data is my life now. Like Graphite is all about data, and we're not the spend data kind of company, but it all ties together, and it happens to tie together around, who's the supplier, how much are we spending, who in the business, and these things should be relatively simple, right? You should be able to get this out of the ERP, whatever data lake you do or don't have, get the spreadsheet, and then you can sit down with the head of marketing with a spreadsheet or a really nice visualization that says, here's the top suppliers that the system says you're using in your business. Most of them are going to fall out of their chair because they didn't realize they had 10 times as many suppliers as they thought. But that opens up this other conversation we were talking about before. Like, okay, what's most important to your business? Does it matter that you have 10,000 suppliers, or should we focus on these top 3 suppliers? And then their questions and your questions are just going to start going, right? Well, what about this? And who's doing that? And which, here's who I think, but are there other suppliers that are doing the same thing? And I think that's where the data, analysis and discussion starts getting really interesting. But I would say, don't be afraid, Natasha. If that's your fear out there from a practical perspective, if you're afraid of data and you're afraid of 20, and I'm not saying that in a demeaning way. Some people are not data people. And if you're a person that just runs the other direction anytime a spreadsheet opens, go find someone on your team, hire someone on your team, find a partner somewhere that loves data, because the people that love data, this is very natural for them.
Yeah, I'm not a data person. And so I will always, that's why.
How did you do it at Nike and these other companies then? If you're not a data person, how did you close that gap on your side?
You know what? That's the benefit of having large team, right? So I always had people who did that. I understand what I need from data. I can define to my team how we as organization need to, what type of data we need to have to make decisions. I understand how to work with data once it arrives to me, but when it arrives to me as information. So that's why, ask me how I do it now. That's why when there were 2 of us, just me and Riley, because Riley is a data god. I think that he created data because he sees the number. I see the numbers. The numbers, he translates it into solution.
Yeah, I think what you're saying there is really important. Like you partnered with somebody that is a data god. And if you have the strategic insights and vision, and you have the ability to achieve data god level, on your team somehow with a big team or a small team, that's what you need. And by the way, in the world of AI, the stakes just went up 10 times, right? Because really good data, really good understanding of the data. My nomination for Person of the Year this year, guys, is, and I'm pushing my marketing team to put this on a magazine cover, is the Person of the Year is data. That's it. I want to put all these zeros and ones and it's a person.
No.
We'll talk about it later, but the AI persona, the agent, is really just a reflection of data. It's algorithms and looks and like characteristics and personality of the data. So we can argue who the person of the year is. I mean, you're my person of the year, Natasha, but underlying all the stuff we're trying to do is data. If you're not good, love it. If you're not good, then find somebody.
Yeah. The reason I brought up that like I'm not a data person is that like it doesn't matter what level you are in an organization. Everyone has something to contribute. If you're a senior procurement leader and you don't understand data, that's fine. I would enter the room and say that I am the least technologically advanced person here in this room. My brain works different. This is not my strength, right? Like I had to learn a lot. Like last year, I probably had maybe like 100 demo solutions of different technologies, demos of different technological solutions, because I had to educate myself on what can work for my future clients, right? So, and because that's my role to match their needs with the technological solutions, it was very much out of my comfort zone. So I know exactly how every CPO feels today who is not a data person or not a tech person. But that's all right. That's why we have teams, and that's why we work together. So we were talking about criteria for building successful SRM. Zach, I think it's your turn to bring it home.
Look, I think my advice would be, if you're doing segmentation, it's not a scientific. It's not. Don't make it an industry. Don't make science out of it. Just sit down with your team, right? People who understand your suppliers. People who understand the business, how it works, the objectives, etc. And just list out some of the key criteria. So obviously you're going to start with spend. Like that's going to be very key. A lot of people then move on to like materiality or criticality. Hold on that one, right? That's more of a risk, because you got to define what critical to making money or critical to your operations, critical to what. Like you got to get a bit granular with those definitions. But spend is definitely one. Another good one that I see a lot of people miss is like, how important are you to them? You should score that, because it tells you who's more likely to actually engage with you in that kind of program. Score your cultural fit as well. If the company, very often you can tell, when we run RFPs at the end of RFP, we've looked at all the proposals. It's a very human judgment to look at a company and say, this is the right company for us. These are the right team. It's the right brand. Like it just aligns with us. And so you got to do that exercise, I think, to get that going. So I would say don't overcomplicate it. Dig deep, go with your gut, and you'll have a good segmentation. Make sure you stay focused on the objective.
That's a great summary. Well, thank you very much for sharing your thoughts, and thank you, our viewers and listeners, for indulging us into yet another deep procurement discussion on supplier relationship management. If any of you are embarking on building it and you feel you're hitting a writer block, call us. We'll be happy to partner with you on that.
And we'd love to help you. Don't forget to like, follow, and share on this episode, making it easier for everybody else to find. We'd love to hear your comments and suggestions. Take care, everybody.